Recording has started, so good morning, good morning. Welcome to Google Forms session. We have a good crowd joining us, so we're excited that you're here. Again, my name is Andreas Johansson, Director of Operations at Streetsboro. I will take you through Google Forms, new, old, and exciting, and it'll be fast and furious. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll go from there. So, assuming that, and I'm going to check with Dan to make sure that Dan can see my screen, right? The Google form, yeah, looks good. Off we go. And then you can also see me up there on the rocket. I'm sure I'll make some funny faces there as we go along. Google Forms, welcome. If you have not seen the latest version of Google Forms, here it is. You'll see that because it has a round infrastructure to it. The first thing to do in a Google form is always name it. So I'm just going to say ATC2020. And then what I like to do is notice up here in the top, see if I can turn something on here that may or may not translate over to the Zoom call. I hope it does. But once you've given the form a name, always come up here and click where it says untitled form. And then just a click over there, it'll transfer the title over. Otherwise, you're going to have an untitled form and you're going to have sort of a mismatch, and it'll be hard for you to find it in your Google Drive later. Notice that Google Forms give you an untitled question, and that's good because it kind of assumes that you're going to want to ask some different things. And so I'm going to take you through each of the question types and describe really quickly what they're good for and maybe what they're not so good for. So what is your favorite color? Good question, right? The multiple choice question, and you can choose over here, we'll go through it here in a little bit. The multiple choice is actually just a single choice. So remember that. You have lots to pick from, but you can only pick one. So if all I give you is red and green, the person has to pick red and green, and that's just how it goes. And I'll show you some other ways of collecting data here in a little bit. Now, notice down here at the bottom, a lot of people miss it, right? So they miss the option of making a question required or not. You'll want to think about that. So if it's a question that you actually need information from and you have to have them fill that out, make it required. But if you ask, for example, like, is there anything else we can help you with? And you make that question required, then you're going to get some bad data because then they're forced to put something in even though they don't want to. So just think about how that required marker works. Now, let's come back in here. I'll zoom in just a little bit. Let's take a look at some other things. The multiple choice question will allow you to add an option, right? You can do another color, right? Or you can say add other, which is super handy because what will happen there is that the participant can fill in their own answer. But danger close. What happens if they just fill in jibber jabber? Now you get bad data. So really think about what it is that you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to collect in terms of data. So something to keep in mind. Now, for those of you working with younger students, notice that as I'm hovering over my answer choice here, I can also go in and say, well, I want to add a picture. You can upload camera by URL, photos, Google Drive, or even a Google image search. So if I want to search for red, let's see what pops up. Maybe I choose a red ball, and then instead of the word red, right, then I get something else. And I can do that for any of them. And that might be helpful if you're collecting information from younger students. So instead of just having the word there, have a visual. And that is pretty easy way to connect sort of visuals with text data. And you're not going to get a bunch of red balls in your answer sheets. You're just going to get the red text, and then you can sort and do what you need to do with the data there. So we're going to look at that in a little bit. All right, let's insert another question. Wait. I'm going to do another multiple choice question, and I want to make it really fast, and I'm going to do something very similar. Notice that there's a duplicate option down at the bottom. Right at the bottom of each question, there's a duplicate. So you just click duplicate, and you get an exact similar question. Boom. If you then wanted to say, for example, what's your favorite sound, right? You can just change the answer or change the question, and then you could delete the answer options out. You can say smooth, loud, whatever it might be, and then keep that other. So if you're just going to duplicate things, and let me show you when that's helpful. So I'm going to duplicate again. So I'm going to say I'm going to collect last name, for example, right? And then instead of multiple choice, I'm going to come over into our short answer text. last name, and then I want to do another one, collects first name. I just click duplicate and then just change to first. And that way I don't have to kind of do work over and over and over again. I'll show you some of these other tips here in a little bit. So we looked at the multiple choice question. Remember, multiple choice, you're only going to get one answer choice out of the participant. Uses the radio button, so it's not the square that we'll look at in a little bit. Radio button on the internet means that you can only choose one alternative. So I like to think of it as the multiple alternative question, because that's what it really is. Now I popped into the short answer option here, and short answer is great for last name, first name, phone number, email, things like that. Things that are not a whole essay, right? So short and sweet, address. And let me show you some cool things that we can do there. So I'm gonna say email address, because we collect that a lot of the time. Now, there's two ways of doing it. So I'm gonna show you both ways in a little bit here. But if you're working within a school domain, if you have a Google domain at school, you are able to automatically collect people's email addresses. And we do that a lot at Streetsboro. So I'll just say, make sure that people log in and collect their email automatically. And I'll show you how that works here in just a little bit. But if you're not, so say you're working with folks like yourself, you're from all over the globe, literally, we have people from all over the world in this call right now, and I wanted to collect your email address, how do I do it and make sure that I get an email address? Well, here's how I do it. So I leave it as the short answer text, but I come down to the three dots at the bottom right-hand corner, and I click show response validation. And this can get a little tricky, so I'll show you one option here. So you can make sure that the answer that they put in is validated based on what it is that you want to collect. So in this case, we're going to collect, and I'm going to click where it says number there, and I'm going to say text, because an email is a text string. And then I'm going to say not contains, but I'm going to say is an email address. And so in this case, what you're forcing your form filler outers, right, your survey attendees, they're forced to put in an email address. And what it's looking for is the @ symbol. So if it doesn't have an @ symbol or .com or .org or something, it's not an email address, helps you get better data. So you want to work with systems to get better data by all means. Okay, let's do another question from scratch. So here's what we do. Come over to your handy dandy toolbar over here. And the first symbol there, the plus sign, is add a question. Then you get, by default, you get a multiple choice, and we don't want that. So we're gonna ask them a longer thing. So we're gonna look at all the different ones. So we did the short answer, we did the multiple choice. Let's do a paragraph one. So the paragraph one is, you know, what are your dreams, you know, for the future? Paragraph allows you to collect a little bit more text. It can handle a lot more text than what the short answer text question type will do. So keep that in mind. If you're going to ask for sort of an extended response, or it's typically good for like, do you have any comments, questions, concerns? Use the paragraph text one. Remember down here, we talked about that required one. Again, if you're asking an open-ended question, like, do you have any questions, comments, concerns, and you make it required, they have to put something there. So consider not doing that. Now, if you're collecting an essay response, which I used to do all the time when I was teaching, I would have a couple of questions for them. They could submit their essay response in here, or, you know, short like paragraph responses. It works super well for that. Let's do another question. So I'm gonna click plus, and I'm gonna come in, and we're gonna choose, we looked at the short answer, paragraph, multiple choice. We're gonna do the check boxes. So check boxes is different than the multiple choice. So check boxes means select all that apply. And that's implied by the question type. So anytime you see squares on the internet, it's select all that apply. So for example, what kind of pets do you have, have at home? And again, they might have more pets, right? Dog, cat, fish, llama, emu. I don't know if you read the story the other day, there's a wild emu running around somewhere. So now what we get on this question type is we get an ability to have all that apply. Now, this is also a good one for adding that other. So for example, if you are asking your students for sort of a back to school, welcome to class inventory, instead of doing that 3x5 note cards to get to know your kids, do a Google form. It's easier, faster, but you might not have a listing of all of the pets that possibly exist. You know, like you didn't know that people had llamas for pets. So add that other and they can fill that out. Just know that then you're kind of allowing the person filling it out to give you some data that you're not able to control, at which point you may get frustrated having to clean that up. Again, this one, and I'll show you when we go to the form here in a little bit. This one will allow you to select all that apply. So I can select dog and cat and fish. And I'll show you what that looks like in the data as it comes in. All right, let's go do another question type. So again, click the plus sign, select, and we're gonna do the drop down one. The drop down one, what state are you from? A great one to have a long list of options, but it doesn't take up a whole lot of space on your device. And that's true if you have a desktop or if you have a mobile device. So if you are on your phone and if you are on your phone and you want to fill that form out, it's key that you don't have to like scroll through all the multiple choice. So a drop down is great. So maybe we say Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Michigan, New York, Indiana, right? What I do sometimes if I make a form that asks for like registration purposes, I do some orienteering. So we have people coming from all over the country to orienteer. I just have a pre-made list in a spreadsheet and I paste it in there. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit. So it works super well. You just paste it into a question and then off you go. So again, the drop down one, you can only select one. So drop down is very similar to the multiple choice, but it doesn't take up space. So instead of having to show 50 states, all the territories, all the Canadian provinces, maybe just do a drop down, put them in that drop down, and then you can scroll through and select one. We're gonna do another question. So we did short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkboxes, drop down. Let's do a file upload. Let's talk about it real quick. And we're gonna say that we need someone to upload a file. Now this works pretty well if you're in a Google domain. If you're working with people outside, it might get a little bit more complicated. So you'll see here that respondents will be required to sign into Google. So you can't really yet collect files from whomever on the internet. And so you'll have to set that up in your Google form. But if you're working within your school domain, which I think most of us are educators on here, this is the perfect option for submissions of any kind, registration forms, any kind of handout that you want them to complete and then submit to you. You can do that. So send me your file here. Now, only allow specific file types? Sure, why not? If you only want PDFs, then select only PDFs. If you only want them to send you a drawing or an image or audio, do that, or you can leave it wide open, blank. I like PDFs. You can say, hey, you need to submit this in a PDF or a Google Doc, I suppose, and call it a day. Maximum number of files, you can have them submit all kinds of files. If they want to submit up to 10 files at a time, they can do that. And then maximum file size, if you want to limit the size of this PDF, you can do that. Now notice, yes, right? Like it can collect a lot of data. So just think about that. You may have some limitations there within your educational account. So about 100 megabyte PDF file is like giant. The 10 megabyte will suffice for most of us during normal operations. Let's do another question. File upload, we're gonna do linear scale. Linear scale is great for rating. Rate the banana, right? Here's where it gets tricky. So let's talk about data collection a little bit. So when we are collecting numbers, that's called collecting quantitative data. Quantitative data is great because we can do something with it. You're able to label the scales, but let's talk about the scale first. It, by default, gives you a 1 to 5 scale. I'm not a big fan of 1 to 5 because guess what? It offers that middle value, which is 3, which tells you that like, nah, I don't really care. It's neutral. Try to never give your a neutral option. Just remove it. Force your respondents to say, I either like it or I don't, and here's the degree to which I like it or I don't. So what I would do is I would say 1 to 4 is a better scale than a 1 to 5. If you want more granular than that, do a 1 to 6. A 1 to 10 scale is super difficult for people to figure out. What's the difference of the banana between like a 7 and an 8? Or an 8 and a 9 rated banana? I don't know. But a 1 to 4, like a 1 is a bad banana and a 4 is a good banana. 3 pretty good. 2, you know, kind of rough, and a 1 is just terrible. So we're gonna say terrible, awesome. The other thing you want to try to do is create the labels for your scale based on what it is you're trying to rate. So instead of having this pre-known notions of like bad to good, try to craft the scale to match the question or what you're actually trying to rate. So we're going to look at what this looks like here when we get back out to the form. And again, the scale, think about an even numbered scale. That way you get better data. Right? So we'll go down to the multiple choice grid. This one gets a little tricky, guys, and so I'm throwing it out there. But we're going to bring in what's called a Likert scale, and that's the one where it says like agree, disagree, right? And again, I'm a big proponent of using just 4 and not having that neutral. Oh, I don't feel anyway. I just feel neutral. So what I do for the multiple choice grid is I say rate these statements. Oops. And we'll do it school appropriate, right? So the rows are going to be the statements, and I'm going to say I like school, right? And then I have a good time at recess. And then we'll do one more. I feel comfortable at home, right? Because I know there's a few school counselors on here. I see you, Mrs. Tutt, I see you. So columns then, right? So rows go left and right. I know this is basic, but rows go left and right. Columns go up and down. The columns are going to be our rating scale. So we're going to go with the basic Likert of sort of disagree, agree. But we're going to say, you know, strongly agree. I find that I like to start with the positives on the left, and then I'm going to say disagree, and then I'm going to say strongly disagree. And you'll see what that looks like here. I'm going to flip over just so we have an idea, because this one is difficult to sort of visualize. So don't worry about here. I'm going to go to preview. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're just going to look at the question here so that you have an idea of what this one looks like. So now we have the statements on the left-hand side. I like school. I have a good time at recess. I feel comfortable at home. And then we have strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Now keep in mind, right? These are radio buttons. So what does that mean? It means I can only select one. So I can say boom, boom, boom. I can't put 2 choices for each statement. Does that make sense, right? Hopefully that makes sense for you at home. Because guess what? There's one more that allows us to check all the boxes. But this is how I would highly recommend that you set up the multiple choice grid. Statements on the left, make them sort of statements that you can agree or disagree to, and then collect the data that way. And again, remember, you've seen this Likert scale, the strongly agree, disagree one. Don't put a neutral in there. No one needs that. People feel one way or another. No one is truly neutral. So just make it easier on yourself. Okay, back to the form, and we'll go all the way back to the end. So here's what it looks like to set that up and to get the kind of result that I just did. We're going to do another one. Get ready. So we're going to do multiple choice, the checkbox grid. Same thing. So select all that apply. Right? Statement here, and then column here. Agree, sometimes, never. And listen, I'm going to skip over this a little bit because I don't really know a good way to use this question type. It's really new. I think they did it because they're like, well, we have the multiple choice grid one, right? And then we have this one. I'm not 100% sure what it's there for, because then now you can select all of them, which I would use a different question type to collect this kind of data. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's there. I would noodle with it a little bit. It's a little bit newer. For data collection purposes, I would collect it differently. And I'll show you why, because this is going to get real messy in the back end when you're trying to analyze the data. This one's much easier because you're going to get one answer per. This one, depending on how you set it up, the multiple choice grid or the checkbox grid, you're going to get all kinds of, I'm going to say crazy data that's going to be hard to deal with. So something to think about. All right, let's add another question. Come down to date and time. Excellent. So today's, well, we're going to say date of report. So I work with a couple of our departments at work. And one of the things I ask them to do every day is fill out what's called a pre-trip report. So that's when they check over their school buses. And so it might be, and I'll show you later, you know that Google Forms already collects the timestamp when something is submitted, but it might be that you're filling something out for a different day. And again, for us that work within a school district, PBIS is probably something you heard about, sort of a positive behavior system. We might want to put in a kudos for a student, and it might be that they did it yesterday, but you didn't have time until today to fill it out. So adding that date to say like, well, when did this actually happen? Or any kind of behavior issue, or something where you want to say like, this is when it actually took place. Add a date to it. And I'm going to show you how it works in a little bit. You used to be able to fiddle around with this, but now it's basically just gives you a date selector. And then we're going to do the time as well so that we have it and we can look at it. So again, the time. Remember, if you really want someone to tell you, you know, what's the date of the report, got to make it required. Same thing with the time, got to make it required. Otherwise, they'll submit it without it, and then you get bad data. So there you have it, guys. Those are all the question types. And that only took about 20 minutes or so. But my advice to you is, if you're not sure, ask someone who has collected a lot of data with Google Forms. Ask me, send us a question here at Streetsboro anytime. We collect a lot of data. I've used Google Forms for about 10 years now, collecting data, and it has evolved into a much better product than it was back in the day. And I'm going to show you some of those features here in a little bit. But just keep that in mind that, you know, like start with the end in mind. Like, here's the data that I want. So here's what I'm going to try to collect, as opposed to just collecting everything under the sun. It's better to collect only what you're actually going to use. So if you're doing that student inventory, for example, like, hey, welcome back to school, tell me about yourself. If you're never going to use the fact that we have pets at home, then don't collect it. Does that make sense? So just keep that in mind, because it makes for a more difficult form. It makes for more time from the respondent, and it kind of clutters up what you are actually trying to do. Okay, back to the form. So eyes on the form here. We're going to look at the top. So we have a bunch of different questions in there. First and foremost, how do we get to the actual form? Because a lot of the people that I work with or have worked with in the past, they'll take this URL. And I know this is hard to look at, but when you're in the edit mode, that URL is different than the public URL to the actual form. So it's important that you come over here to the eyeball or to the preview button, click there, it'll open up a new tab, and here is what your actual form will look like. And I'm just going to go through quickly and add, you know, grab some data so that we can use it. Favorite color, I'm going to say green. Notice I can only select one, right? Green. Favorite sound, I'm going to say smooth. My last name, I'm going to say Johansson. Notice I'm misspelling it, right? And I'm going to say AJOSCSrockets.org. Now, if I put something here, right? Oops. If I didn't have that .com or .org, see what it does? It says must be a valid email address. So pretty sweet. Saves me a headache or two. What are your dreams? Cake. Put that in there. What kind of pets do you have at home? I have a cat and 2 kids, but I don't think they would count. What state am I from? I'm going to drop down. Like, look at how nice this goes. Boop, right? So imagine that longer list of states or lots of choices or whatever they have, but they don't take up a lot of space on your screen, which is what you want. A Google form that has 50 questions on it on the same page, people are going to tap out and they're going to give you bad data. So try to help them out by making sure that it's short and sweet. So I'm going to select my state. Notice I can't select more than one. So this is like a select one. Send me your file. I'm not going to do that. This would just sort of open up an upload file, and you can upload. Pretty self-explanatory. Rate the banana. Awesome. Notice I can't give me that value, you know, the cop-out value, as I call it. I have to make a choice. 3 and 4 are going to be positives. 1 and 2 are going to be negatives. No one is ambivalent about bananas. Rate the statements. I'm going to say I like school. I have a good time at recess. Sure. Feel comfortable at home. Yes. But let's do a disagree just so that we can play with the data in a little bit here. Select all that apply. Again, this one, listen, guys, I don't know what this one is for. The checkbox grid, I honestly don't know. I don't use it. I don't really understand how the data comes in. If you know, please share with us. I would stay away with it and collect that data differently. All right, and then lastly, the date and time. Here's a quick way to do it. You can tap into here and like type in the month, date, year, but it's very specific. Click on the calendar. It'll give you a drop-down calendar. You can click to today if it's not already today, and then it just fills it out. Look at that. Or you can predate, forward date it, so you can say, well, it's going to happen on the 13th of November, bing, bang, boom, and you don't have to think about it. Dan, what are you saying? Okay, Dan just sent me a question. All right, a teacher on here uses this for IEP info. Perfect. Send us that example. I would love to look at it. And I think we're referring right, Dan, to the checkbox grid. So let's look at it. I would love to see it. I'm sure we can roll it out. Time, same thing. This one gets a little tricky because you have to kind of put in 3:45 and then AM or PM. For the time collector, I would think about like, do you actually need the actual time? And you could, if you're doing like a report, like a behavior report of some kind, but it gets a little bit difficult. And I will say that the time selector is difficult to do on a mobile device. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'm gonna submit, and then we're gonna come back and do some more advanced stuff. I'm gonna submit it so that we get it. Hooray, submit another response. We can do that if we wanted to. I'll clean up here just a little bit. Now when we come back to the form, I notice up here at the top, I have a responses, so I can click over to my responses. This is inside of the edit version or the edit interface of the form. And then automatically, and I think this is the best feature, is it'll just start graphing some stuff out. Now, remember, it'll only graph stuff out if it has the data and the data is able to be quantifiable. So you can't quantify things that are unknown, right? So we only have one answer. So I think what we got to do is I think we got to go here and we're going to fill it out and we're going to give some more data so that you can see, right? And then that one's not required. Dog, cat, fish, llama, emu. I think we're good. We didn't make the rest of them required. Oh, some of them are required, right? Boom. 2:33 a.m. just to get some more data. And now we can see our graphs kind of move. Now it's real time. So whenever you're collecting data, it's real time. Those graphs will start to build. You'll get your key over here and you'll get your percentages. And if you hover over them, you'll get the number. So you'll get the idea of the number of people that responded. Notice this is a new feature up here. This is one of the new features in Google Forms. If you want to copy this chart, put it right into a Google Slides presentation, Google document, copy it, paste it in the other application. Works beautifully. I used this the other day for a board presentation. We had some questions out to the district about, things that are happening in the summer 2020, COVID. And so we took some questions. I was able to very quickly copy and paste and make it look good. So you don't even have to look at the spreadsheet data and make your own charts there. Just copy and paste. What's your favorite sound? Now let's look at some of it. So this is quantitative, easy peasy. Some of the qualitative stuff, right? Here's how it comes in. So you're gonna need to massage and deal with that data. My recommendation is later today, I think 1 p.m., we're doing a Google Sheets session, and I will show you how to quickly take bad sort of last names and bad text and fix it and make it pretty. Email addresses are there. What are your dreams? Here's a bar graph, right? So now we have an instant idea of what kind of pets do we have at home or whatever it is that you're measuring. Same thing with the state. We only had the one, Ohio. Rating the banana. And then, right, so the Google Forms will do the graphs the best way it knows how. So you'll get some good visuals. Rate the banana. This would actually be a bar graph up and down, depending on how many answers you have. Here, it kind of color coordinates it for you, right? So strongly agree, disagree, and so on and so forth. If you added some more data there, let's do that. Just so you have an idea, we'll scroll down and we'll add some more data. And then we're going to need to do these 1 a.m. Boom. So if we're looking at the data, there it comes, right? So we have 2 that said that they strongly agree. We have 1 and 1 that sort of agree and disagree, right? We have a good time at recess. Really quick way of getting some data back from you. And then same thing with this one. I could see where you could use it, but again, this is from that multiple choice grid or the checkbox grid. And then time and date. Gets a little tricky, so think about it, what you're gonna do with the data. Just have kind of an idea of like, what's happening. This here means that you have 2 answers for the 26th and then 1 for the 13th. It's a little bit difficult to quantify. So take a look at that, start learning what it looks like, and then how to use the data. Now, if you're a spreadsheet fanatic, and again, that's a different session, I just want to show you how to get it into a spreadsheet. All the data from your Google form lives up here. So you have, even though we only have 3 responses, you can click this at any time. So you don't have to do it right away. You don't have to, you can do it like after you collect all the form data, you can then turn it into spreadsheet data. But all you got to do is say, click, make a spreadsheet. I typically have it auto name it, and then say create, and you'll see what happens. It'll automatically load the data into a spreadsheet. And the column that we want to look at is column A. That's where we're going to see a date and time stamp, and that is where the form has been submitted. Now, you can do all kinds of cool stuff from here, but that's in a different session for today, so we don't really have time in the Google Form session to do too much spreadsheet data, but join us again later today, and we'll show you how to clean this up and make it look pretty and make it work for you. All right, let's take a look at some of the other settings in a Google form. And again, remember, I'm on a school domain. So if you don't have sort of the school educational version of Google, it may look and feel and taste different than what I'm showing you here. But Google Forms has rolled out. So like most people I find now have the later version. And you can tell again by these rounded corners, that means you have the later version of Google Forms. We're gonna start up in the tool panel up in the top right hand corner. We're going to click on the grid, or sort of the settings, not the grid, the gear, I guess, right? The settings, and we'll go through these settings. And this is where I mentioned before, if you wanted to automatically collect email addresses from your domain, you just say collect email addresses, and then it'll automatically grab people's email address. And here's what that'll do. It only works with your internal domain folks, but it requires them to sign into the Google account, and then it'll automatically grab that email. It does not work with a parent's Yahoo address, doesn't work with an AOL.com. So just keep that in mind that, you know, if you're collecting internally, super great. If you're collecting from students, use it. That way you're getting the best data, and you can then tell who's filling out what. Response receipts. If you want them to get an email back with their form, sure. If they request it, or always, that's up to you. Or just leave it blank, depending on what you want it to do. But if you're doing a t-shirt order, or I see, we had one of our teachers, Mrs. Durkins, right, who works with yearbook and things like that. So if you want an order form, you definitely want to send a response receipt their way. This is where then, if you are on a Gmail domain, you won't see this, but if you're on a school domain, it'll say you can restrict it to Streetsboro City Schools, or whatever your domain name is, or not. So if you're working with internal people, if you're collecting data from students, for sure, restrict it to users in your domain. If you're collecting from parents, uncheck it, right? It's the #1 mistake that tends to happen when you collect data from parents in the community, is that they'll open the form, it'll say, uh-oh, got to sign into Google, but it's a quick fix. And you can do it even after you send the form out, but take a minute to look at the settings. So you can restrict it, and then look at this. If you do restrict it, you can limit to 1 response. And that's perfect for data collection. If you want sort of a get to know you, if you want a climate survey, if you want a t-shirt order, whatever you're doing, and you only want people to fill that out 1 time, you can do that. And that is amazing. That was not available in the beginning of Google Forms. And so you would get these duplicate forms all the time. Furthermore, you can let respondents, I'm going to uncheck it in case we need to fill out some more stuff. Respondents can edit after they submit. That's only available if you're then collecting who they actually are. But that means that if they make an edit, they can go back to that form, edit it. The tricky thing there is that if you need to collect it by a certain date, you need to kind of manage that. Otherwise, they can go back afterwards that you look at the data and then edit, and then you may or may not get that. So just kind of play with that, but know that that feature is there. You can also allow for them to see a summary of the charts and text responses. This might be cool for like a formative assessment. You know, so just do a quick formative assessment, and then when they click on it, they'll see what everyone else said. Could be a neat way to learn together. And then this is where you would set the maximum size of all files uploaded. So you would have to go in and say, yes, I'm okay with collecting up to 1 terabyte of files, which is an enormous size. But remember, back in that question, there's like a max limit. So if you need to edit that, you can. We're going to hop over from the general tab to presentation mode. Presentation mode has to do with what does a form look like to the user. And so you can show a progress bar, and that's that one where it says, look, you're on page 1 out of 64. I don't know how I feel about the progress bar. I tend to not use it because when I take a survey and it does say you're on page 1 out of 32 and they just promised you that it would take 6 minutes, I'm like, no. And so then I tend to click so that I get through it. I tend to not tell people how long the form is. And I also try to make a short form. So the progress bar, play with it, but maybe it's overkill. Shuffle the question order. Yeah, if you're doing a formative assessment, even a summative assessment test, you can do that. You can shuffle the question order. Fantastic. That way, kids sitting right next to each other on their one-to-one devices, or even if they're at home or they're doing a quiz on the bus, they're not going to be on the same question at the same time. Fantastic. And then show a link to submit another response. Now, if you only want them to submit at one time, then uncheck that. But if you want them to fill out a couple times, for example, we're using this feature for your certificate of attendance today. You're going to need to fill out one for each session that you attend. So we leave that open for you, right? To say, you want another one? Sure, click this one and it'll reload the form. Confirmation message, right? If you want something customized in there, you can do that. Hooray, you're on your way, right? Otherwise, it'll just say your response has been recorded, and then you would save it. We'll go to quizzes. Of course, you know that we can make Google Forms into quizzes, which is super cool. All you got to do is say, make it a quiz. You can even turn on locked mode, which means that respondents within a domain, right? And this is new, so here you go. Like, this is what we've been waiting for some time. So if you haven't seen it, here it is. If you turn on locked mode and you're within a school domain, kids can't open up other tabs, right? So it is what it is. They can only be on that form. And so instead of having Google help them out, they're on their own. But that's what we would want, especially I would think for some sort of a summative assessment, but maybe for a formative too, right? So you just turn on locked mode. Now remember, this only works in a Google domain for a school or some sort of a like legit domain. Doesn't work in Gmail. Release the grade. Do you want to do that immediately after each submission, or do you want to do it later after you review it? We'll go into quizzes just a little bit, but that's like a whole other session on how to make and deal with quizzes on Google Forms. But just know that basically if you give a formative or a summative assessment, they take it, they click submit, they can get the answers right away or later after you review it and you say, okay, I'm going to release all the grades out. And then again, what can the respondents see? Can they see the missed questions? Can they see the correct answers? And can they see the point values? So if you're doing a summative and you give them 2 or 3 days, because we're working asynchronously to work on the quiz, maybe you don't show them the right answers or sort of the missed questions or whatever until much later so that there isn't that competitive advantage. So just keep that in mind. Making a quiz is a whole different session, and we don't really have all the time for it today, but you should know that this locked mode on Chromebooks is amazing. And so if you have a one-to-one setting like we do in StreetSprower this year, just turn on that locked mode. No one's going to be opening up any other tabs, which is like Shazam. I'm going to click save, come back to my form, and then we're going to make it pretty. I'm going to come back to questions, and I'm going to start by deleting a question or two just to show how we do that. At the bottom, if you don't want these date and time questions, just click the trash can. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to do it anyways just so we have it. And I'm going to leave a few things here. I'm going to take the file thing out. I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to leave that so that we get a form that we can fill out a little bit more quickly and get some data. All right, let's make it pretty. So if we go to this preview button again, let's take a look at what it looks like. Let's see. What is it? Let me check. Okay, quizzes. We're not going to make it a quiz. Turn it off. Here it is. Purple is the default color for Google Forms. It's like, it's okay. Let's make it what you want it to be. So click on the color paddle or color palette, customize, and then you can customize the theme. Choose a header image from most of the standard images. And if you're using Google Classroom, you'll recognize that these are the same images from Google Classroom. Just select one header image and watch what happens. It'll style your whole form to look nice and pretty. And if you don't like that theme color, you can set it to green, you can set it to blue, or you can go crazy and just say, I'm gonna do my own color, and then it'll style it accordingly. So that's one way. You can also do it manually, right, with the colors, the theme colors, and then you can change the font style from basic, decorative, formal, and playful. So let's go to playful. A lot of people like to do that. Here's what I have to say. At least it's not Comic Sans. And where's Dan Stitzel? He needs to hold me back, rein me in, because we could be here all day long talking about Comic Sans. So playful's okay. I mean, it looks all right. But let's not make your form like childish, I guess, right? Because we're professional educators. Make it easy to read. So the basic one, great for connecting or collecting stuff. The decorative, hard to read. So yes, if you're collecting RSVPs for your wedding, use decorative. If you're doing a formal dinner party maybe, and you like that, you know, the serif font, like a Times New Roman, use that. I stay with basic 9.5 times out of 10 because it's easy to read. It looks good on mobile devices, and it's just easy to manage. So there's your form. Let's see what it looks like. We're gonna come over here, refresh, reload it. Where's my header image? There it is, right? So, whoops, there's my header image. I can style it, do whatever I want. Now, let me show you this too, kind of quick and dirty here. If we wanted to style it according to your school, for example, I would say choose image. I would go to upload. I would browse my file. I would get my file browser. I'd come over to where I have all of my, let's see, logos. And then I would choose a PNG file. I like PNGs and JPEGs maybe, but PNGs for sure. Look what happens here. You get kind of it's a little tricky because this is the size of the header. So if you have a giant image, it may or may not look good. So I'm just going to choose that middle portion. But watch what happens with the colors of the form. It'll kind of figure it out, like great colors. It switches it over to a yellow scheme. I like blue. That looks better. Let's see what the form looks like. Shazam, and all of a sudden you have a form that's kind of branded according to your needs. You can even go in and kind of say, well, the background color should be white as opposed to blue, and then it makes it even easier to see. So there's a form then that you can collect, especially if you're principal building person, right? Like, and you want to send something out to your parents, try to style it, try to get a hold of a high resolution logo. And for all those rockets out there, right, in our audience today, if you need this high resolution, transparent, which means no background rocket logo, shoot me an email, I'll send it to you because it's pretty sweet. And that's the one we should be using instead of something with a white background. Okay, Google Forms coming back. Is there something we missed? Well, there's a couple things. Let's look at what we can do in the send box over here. A lot of people miss it. They're like, well, how do we get this form out to people? Well, easy, just send it, especially if you're within that domain. If you hear that buzzing noise, I think it's a blue jay out here, so don't worry about that. It's animal critters getting involved. You can send it via email, right? You can send it via a link, so there's your link. You could even shorten the link, pretty sweet. So instead of having that giant link to a Google form, you can shorten it automatically, or you can embed it. So embedding means you're gonna put it on a website somewhere, you want the whole form to show. That's a pretty cool option, but that's a little bit more, you gotta know how to do it. You can even send it out to Facebook or Twitter if you have those connections. What this will do is it'll grab the form and it'll bring it to Twitter, and you'll have to authenticate with Twitter or Facebook, and then it'll post it in there. So just keep that in mind. You can also style sort of the height and width. So to embed something, you'll have to be ready to do a little bit more web stuff. But in this case, I'm gonna send it to my friend Dan Stitzel, and I'm gonna type in you know, the email address. If you have email groups, like we have a tech team at Streetsboro, right? I can send it to an email group, or if you have a whole staff group or something like that, it's easy peasy to get it out. Subject line, right? Demo form, you can edit that. I've invited you to fill out the form. And I can say, no need to actually do it. And then of course you want to include the form in the email if that is available, depending on who you're sending it to. So notice I send it to the group, may not allow me to include the form there. I'm going to click send, off it goes. Dan hopefully will give me thumbs up at some point when he gets the form, and then he can fill it out and off you go. And that way you don't have to send a link, you don't have to mess around with that. So if you're collecting data from just internal people or a mailing group, that's the quickest and easiest way to do it. The other thing to think about, if you're sending it to parents, you might have a mailing group for parents. If they have some other email system other than Google, and you say, oh yeah, go ahead and include the form there, what will happen is that they'll just get a link. It'll say like, Andreas sent you a Google form. We'd love for you to fill it out, click this link to do so, and it'll just take them to the actual Google Forms. The other thing we want to look at up at the top, because we're going to wrap up here in just a few minutes, the three dots up here will have some other tools for you. Undo, you can make a copy of the whole form, you can move it to trash, you can get a pre-filled link. That's a little bit advanced. We'd look at that in a different session. You can print it, you can add collaborators, and we won't go into the script editor and add-ons today, but just know that there's some other things that you can do with Google Forms, like you can limit the answers based on data that you're collecting and things like that, but we don't typically have time for that in just 45 minutes. But send us your questions. We have no problem helping you out. And that doesn't matter if you are a Streetsboro staff or if you're with someone else. Let's see if there's one more thing I wanted to show you. I forget. Oh, when it comes to organizing, just a general tip in Google Forms, try to work backwards. So here's what I do. I'll take you over to my Google Drive. So for today, or for this conference, right, in my Drive, I have a folders called projects. Let's see if I can zoom in here a little bit. I have projects, and then we have a folder called ATC2020. And then for this session, I made a forms session. And in here is where I put my Google form. That way, when I'm now collecting, right, it all goes into that one folder. The worst thing you can do, not the worst thing, but if you just generate a form and then you generate that spreadsheet and then now it's like nowhere because it's in your Google Drive, you might never find it. So think about that when you set up a form. If you're going to collect t-shirt orders, if you're going to collect behavior data, if you're going to do whatever, start with a folder first. Say, okay, behavior, PBIS data, behavior data, then it's going to be this form, then, right? Or if I'm going to do this club, the chess club, and then we're going to do this and we're going to do a t-shirt order, just organize yourself so that you don't end up with a chess club t-shirt order form for 2020 just randomly in your Google Drive, because you might never find it. So a few more things before we leave, and I know it's all over the place, but we try to fill it with as much as we can. I wanted to show you this feature, and this is one of the new features. We looked at images, we looked at headings and things like that, but you can import questions. So this is your end of the day bonus. Don't work harder, right? Work a little bit smarter. So if you're going to use the same type of questions on multiple Google Forms as you're going forward, just import a question. So I'm going to select this question and I'm going to say, I want to use a question from this other form. And then here's the form that we're using for your certificate of attendance. What session do you want certificate for? Use that one, import the question, Shazam, it just brings it in. And so if you have that form already that has all the states, if you have that form that has all of the options for behavior data or whatever, no need to retype it, just reuse it. So here are all the sessions from today. It's a drop-down question. Now I'm using it in my form. And so instead of having to like retype it, automatically I get this nice drop-down form and I can reuse it. So that's reusing the question. We're seeing a lot of that in Google. Google Classroom allows you to reuse posts. We can reuse questions and forms. Lots and lots and lots of great functionality. That's it. It's 9:50. If you have questions, let us know. Let's see. We'll post shortly. Questions. Good morning. I'm just going to look through here. Perfect. Dan is taking care of it. And if you have any questions in the future, just send us an email. Contact information is online. You can find us at Streetsboro City Schools. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the screen share. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dan, did we miss anything? I'm looking at Dan. Dan's not even here. There he is. Let's see. Let's hear. Can you unmute, Dan? How do we do? Do we have any questions that I missed, Dan?
No, we're good. We had just a question about grid choices. So I went back over multiple choice grid and checkbox grid. Have multiple choice, you'll get one answer per row. And then we had just a question about pixelation for the header size.
Yeah.
So from what I have researched and what I have used, the best pixelation here, let me pull it up, would be if you want to do 1600 by 400 would fit that image the best for your image at the top of your form. So those were the two questions that we had. Then we had to talk about how to use IEP data for the checkbox grid, but that was it.
That's cool. Yeah, and we would love to see that. I would love to see that example and then bring it to Streetsboro. So for sure. 1600 by 400, Dan is talking about pixels. And you could literally do a Google image search for images that are 1600 by 400, or you can make them yourself. I think I will throw out unsplash.com is a great resource that we go to all the time for stock images. So if Google doesn't have the stock images, go to Unsplash. You can use those images for whatever you want to. We use them for our website. So that's a quick and easy way to get good images for your stuff. Dan, before we go, what's the secret code, Dan?
Would this one be 1, 2, 3, 4 as well?
No, it's 4, 5, 6, 7.
4, 5, 6, 7.
I know. So 4, 5, 6, 7 is your secret code for that certificate of attendance. Maybe let's paste it into the chat box there. Will you do that, Dan, for us? And then I'm going to highlight. Dan is up next, so we got to shut down and get into the other call. Dan's going to do whiteboards at 10, Flipgrid at 11. That'll be Missy. Ed Puzzle 101 at noon. That'll be Dan. Beautiful data with Google Sheets at 1 p.m. Google Classroom with Molly at 2. Parent communication at 3, and then Gmail basics and new features at 4 p.m. We got a loaded schedule for you. But enjoy your day. We'll see you in a bit if you're joining us. Other than that, have a great rest of your morning. Thank you and good night.